Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the home of behind-the-scenes interviews, stories, and memories that celebrate the heritage of the great game of hockey. The Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast is hosted by Mark Willand. A prolific minor league scorer during the days of the six-team NHL, Norm Beaudin was an original member of the expansion St. Louis Blues in 1967. Later, he became the first ever player to sign with the Winnipeg Jets of the fledgling World Hockey Association in 1972. With the 72-73 Jets, Beaudin was paired with the Golden Jet Bobby Hull and center Christian Bordeleau to form the luxury line. All three players would top the 100-point mark, with Beaudin netting 103. His successful four-year run with the Jets culminated in May 1976 as the Jets toppled Gordie Howe and the Houston Aeros to win their first Avco Cup championship. What was it like jumping to the WHA, playing with Bobby Hull? Which NHL legend gave Beaudin a two-hander that he still feels today? Let's talk with the man they call the original and find out. Well, we're thrilled to have Norm Beaudin on with us today. Norm, let's start in 1971-72. You're playing with the Cleveland Barons of the American Hockey League, and you're approached to play for a league that doesn't exist yet, the World Hockey Association.
Yes. Anyway, Mark, thanks for having me and going over the WHA again. Yes, it all started in Cleveland in 1972 when, I heard about stories about, the new league being formed, and then I heard about Bobby Hull maybe, jumping leagues, and it was quite interesting at that time. But one day in Cleveland, I got a call from Billy Robinson, who was the head honcho for the Winnipeg Jets for Benny Haskins, of course. And he gave me a call and he says, "Norm, I'd like to have a talk with you." And I said, "Sure, why not?" So we met in some maybe a back alley or something. Not quite, but we met some restaurant where nobody knew or ever hockey player have been there. So we started talking about the situation, and Billy Robinson says, "Norm, we're talking about a new league, and bringing in Bobby Hull and bringing in some other players." And I said, "Oh, it sounds great," because I was in Cleveland and hoping to get back to the NHL with Minnesota North Stars, which I had played for that season. And it sounded really interesting, and I thought maybe it would be a good idea to do it. So he says, "Why don't you come to Winnipeg and meet me with Anna Stukas, who was the general manager." And after the season with Cleveland Barons, we finished the playoffs, and they flew me to Winnipeg, and we, talked it over a little more, and it sounded great. And, going back to Canada, not back to Winnipeg, but going to a Canadian city sounded intriguing. So we talked it over. We had a nice dinner, and they said, "We'd, like you to come here." And I guess that's history was made. I was the original Jet.
Absolutely. Now, I'm assuming there was a significant pay increase with your decision to join the WHA.
Oh, definitely. Double my salary, which was not that much, but I did double my salary. And going to Winnipeg sounded good. And again, with Bobby Hull hadn't made his decision yet, but I said, why not do it? And I was pretty sure that Bobby Hull would jump leagues because after a few stories, even though he hadn't signed, I did sign the contract, and I was happier than heck. And going to Winnipeg, and hopefully joining Bobby Hull, which we did.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly. The marquee player in the entire league ends up on your line with Chris Bordeleau. I was curious, obviously, we know that the line was extremely productive throughout the season. You yourself, actually, all three players had over 100 points. Was that something that you guys clicked right away in training camp, or did you start on a different line? Did things move around, or did you guys just click right away and you were off and running?
Well, it's ironic, Mark, that at the beginning of the season, Bobby Hull couldn't even attend a training camp because he was in court. So we had training camp in Kenora, Ontario, and I don't think Bobby Hull came onto the scene on the ice before about 15 games. And when he did get his rights to play, somehow, I think it was, Bobby and Chris Bordeleau and myself, we just connected. Even in our practices, we sort of just connected, and the chemistry was there right from the beginning. And as soon as Bobby Hull started to play, we got going, and the first game we played, our line clicked, and we never looked back. It was like the chemistry was there right away. We knew that our line was going to be clicking, and which we did all year, and it was a great season for the three of us.
Talk to me a little about Bobby Hull. You obviously had played against him earlier in your NHL career, but I'm assuming you may had a new appreciation for him when you get a chance to actually play with him on a daily basis.
Well, it's ironic, but I have a story about Bobby Hull. When I was at St. Louis Blues, we went into Chicago, and I was playing, against Bobby, and we're on the ice at the same time, and for some reason he scored a couple goals in that one shift, and not that it was a nice goal. One goal, hit his pad and it went in the net, but the next one was in with a pretty good shot. So I told Bobby, I said, you cost me my job in St. Louis, and I said, here we are. You owe me something.
Right.
So,
well, you definitely weren't alone.
No, that's right. So we started playing together, and right away it was like poetry in motion. We just clicked, and we worked so well together. The chemistry was there right from the beginning, and of course, Chris Bordeleau having played with Bobby in Chicago, he knew, what Bobby did and what he could do, and what he did when you give him the puck. And I said, why not? So I started working the corners, and I said, who do I give it to? And
right.
Anytime you gave it to Bobby, you were pretty sure that he was going to let one go a top corner or frighten the goaltenders, especially when they didn't have face mask at the time. So Bobby would set him up, and he never stopped scoring.
Right, you did a good job of that. Norm was, I believe, 65 assists that year. I was curious also, your team was a little bit different at WHA because you did have Hull. You attracted a lot more media attention, especially Bobby. Talk to us a little bit about how he handled himself off the ice and promoted the WHA and the Jets.
Well, I've always said Bobby is the greatest ambassador of any sport in this world. And he certainly was an ambassador for the WHA. I mean, he made it happen. He made it happen for so many hockey players in the NHL and so many European hockey players too. So to me, he was nothing but the greatest for hockey and for the WHA. And, I got some stories about Bobby. We used to go into a city and, generally we had a pretty good game. And, of course, everybody wanted to get Bobby's autograph. And some games I'd see about 100, 200, 300 people waiting for him to sign autographs, and he would. So we all went in a bus, and every time, especially on the road, we'd be in the bus waiting, and sometimes we'd wait 2 hours for Bobby.
Wow. Before
he finished signing the autographs, and he would never leave till he signed every autograph in the building, and that's why the people loved him, the kids loved him, the fans loved him anywhere we went, and he was such a great ambassador for the game. I can't tell you enough.
He sure was. I know my own experiences as a kid going to Hartford to see the Jets play and getting an autograph from Bobby Hull. He always made you feel like you were the most important person in the building, and it definitely made a big impression on me. In addition to watching him play, I enjoyed watching him interact with the fans as well.
Norm, in addition to the luxury line, the Jets had a very well-balanced veteran team on defense, guys like Bob Wojtowicz, Larry Horning. But you were especially strong in goal with what I think was the league's best 1-2 punch in goal, Ernie Wakely and Joe Daly.
Yeah, well, you're right about the goaltending situation. We had 1-2 punch, and Joe played super, and so did Ernie Wakely. So, it's as you very well know, if you don't have goaltending, you can't win. And basically, in a lot of games, especially I think when we played Houston Aeros with the Howes there, we had to play big time, and Joe Daly and Ernie played well, and they kept us in a lot of games. And once they made a couple of great saves, and knowing the way we could play, our line especially, the way we could play, we would get a couple goals and then would be ahead, and so we could change our game plan, especially being ahead 2 or 3 goals, because of Joe Daly and Ernie, the way they played the game.
As would be a pattern in your personal career, as we get to the postseason, you turn it up another notch, averaging over 2 points a game in the postseason for the Jets that year. Including one of those nights was a 7-point night, 3 goals, 4 assists versus the Minnesota Fighting Saints. It seemed like you, Chris, Bobby, and the entire team were really gelling as you got through the end of the regular season and into the postseason.
Yeah, I think that during the playoffs, we put it in second gear again, our line, and we put the pressure on the other lines. And of course, again, giving it to Bobby with always helps your point. So it was great. I'll never forget it. That's for sure.
You also, in the finals, you play another strong team, my own hometown team, the New England Whalers. Lose a tough 6-game series in the finals. What you look back at that Whalers team? They were very deep on defense, strong in goal, some good forwards up front. What were your memories of the New England Whalers, the eventual champions that year?
Well, they had 3 pretty solid lines, and of course, they had a tough guy there, Teddy Green, and they were difficult to play against because, like I said, they could score. Every line could score goals, and a couple games they took us apart, but it was a good series, and I enjoyed playing against them because they had a real balanced squad, and they showed it against us, that's for sure.
Well, after that great first season in Winnipeg, the team stagnates a bit in year 2. So in the off-season of 1974, the Jets do something unprecedented. They import 6 European players, 2 from Finland, Veli Katola and Hexi Riorante, and, of course, 4 from Sweden, Kurt Larson, Lars-Erik Schuberg, Anders Hedberg, and Ulf Nilsson. What was your reaction to the Europeans joining the team, and how were they received by the guys in the locker room in general?
Well, I never had a problem with the European hockey players because they were so talented. They had so many skills. You Hedberg, Nilsson, Schoberg, Thomas, he played for the Detroit. He came from Bergman.
Yeah, Tom Bergman.
Yeah, and so they were talented. They were good. And it's not because they were Europeans. They said they're not tough. They won't go in the corners. But that was totally the opposite. You had to respect them in every phase of the game, and which I did, and I was totally in awe of them, really, the way they played. So I did accept their talents, and having Europeans on the team, it gave us a real good balance, and the history, shows it that they were nothing but helping, a great help to our hockey team and to the Winnipeg Jets and to the WHA. I'm proud of to say that the Winnipeg Jets were instrumental in bringing in the European hockey players and get involved and just totally phase into our hockey leagues, and then of course the NHL followed suit later on, and then watching Hedberg and Nilsson, when we won the championship, it was unbelievable to watch them, the way they passed the puck, the way they shot the puck, and like I said before, I remember Nilsson going in the corners with a couple tough guys and dishing it out. He wouldn't take any guff from them. And Hedberg, he was hard to catch, hard to hit.
Right.
So it was great watching them, and they proved it over the years. In the WHA, and when they went to the NHL, they played well there too. So Winnipeg Jets, we could compete in the NHL with our hockey team, with the Swedes, with the Finns. I thought it was the best thing that we ever did, and it was the best thing that the WHA did, and like I said, the NHL followed suit, and now that's all you see.
Oh, absolutely. That was the
you
cornerstone.
See skill. Yes.
Cornerstone of those early Edmonton Oilers teams. Glenn Sather often said that he patterned them after those Jets teams. And certainly the Jets, the first year that the Swedes came over and Veli-Pekka Katola and Hexy came over, the team actually somehow missed the playoffs that year. It was a year Hull scored 77 goals. However, the next year, off and running, a dominant team, high-flying. But in order to win the Avco Cup, you've got to beat a very strong two-time defending champion Houston Aeros team. Everybody has a Gordie Howe story, Norm, as you know. I was curious of what your memories are of Gordie playing in the WHA.
Well, I think it was 1973. We're playing an exhibition game in Montreal and against the Houston Aeros, and I had a semi-breakaway, and Gordie Howe give me a two-hander, and I can still feel it. My ankle went numb, and I think I can still feel it. And it was amazing, that this guy at his age, and he could play that great. And of course, he was the greatest hockey player in the world at that time. And then playing with his sons made it that much more remarkable to see. This happening with Gordie Howe and his two boys. So it was an honor playing against Gordie Howe, even though he did give you a couple, shots with his stick. But I enjoyed playing against him, and it was always a challenge playing against Gordie Howe and his two boys. Of course, Mark turned out to be pretty good too.
Sure, Hall of Famer himself, and I had the opportunity to work with Gordie when I worked with the Whalers for 6 years, and I can say honestly that every player that I met, whether it be a teammate of his or an opponent, had two things to say about him. Number one, great guy, and they love him. Two, they'd often point to a scar or complain of a aching back or ankle or whatever, and attribute that to their initial run-in with Gordie, who would send a message and clearly got himself enough room to be one of the great players in the history of hockey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fortunately, I think it was a good thing I was playing with Bobby Hull also because, Gordie respected Bobby, so maybe he laid off a bit. Who knows?
Right. That's a good point.
That was a good thing.
Norm, your last game in professional hockey in North America was winning the Avco Trophy for the Winnipeg Jets. How did that feel, and can you remember your emotions at that time? Did you know, first of all, did you know that was going to be your last year?
No, I didn't. No, it's ironic. No, but winning the Avco Cup was was an honor, and it was the greatest thing that had ever happened to me, really, because being with Bobby Hull and winning the Avco Cup, the championship, is great, and beating the Houston Aeros, that made it much better, especially against Gordie Howe. But I didn't know it was going to be my last year. I had no intention. But what happened is I still had 2 years left on my contract. And because we had the Winnipeg Jets had training camp in Europe, in Sweden, Finland, and Czechoslovakia, someone from Switzerland watched me play, and I think we were playing against the Swedes, and I scored a couple goals. And the guy liked the way I played, my style. So when I got back to Winnipeg, it was about Christmas time. I got a letter from Switzerland, so I just put it in my locker, and I never opened it. And one day I said, I better start opening my mail. And I opened this letter, and it's from Switzerland. It was a manager from the Langnau hockey team offering me a contract. But we still hadn't finished the season. So after we won the championship, I read again the letter totally, and I says, it sounds not too bad. They were offering me a contract to go coach and play in Switzerland. So after the season, I give him a call, and he says, yeah, come on down. They flew me to Switzerland, and I talked to them, and we looked at the contract. We looked at the town I was going to play in, which was near Bern. And it was a German town, but I speak French, and so I had 4 kids. So I said, "Oh man, going to Switzerland with 4 kids, under 11 years old, it was a challenge, and not speaking German, it was a bigger challenge." So they offered me this contract, and I came back home, talked to my wife and the kids, and they says, "Let's do it." So I left the Winnipeg Jets, and they let me go. They gave me my official release, and went to Switzerland. And the rest is history again.
How did you enjoy the experience of playing in Switzerland?
Well, it was great. Like I couldn't speak German at the time, but so I had an interpreter. And after my first year, I went to school for 3 months and immersed for 2 hours a day, my wife and I. And I learned German. And my second year, I was coaching German. And we had the best of both worlds there. We were involved with the ambassadors in Switzerland. My kids went to an embassy school, so they enjoyed every minute of it. They learned German. So and the hockey was great. The hockey was good, and the traveling wasn't as grueling as it was in WHA.
Right.
We played one game a week, practiced 3 times a week. The first 2 years, we lost 13 games out of 60 games. So we had a great team. But then I went to the French part, and we had a tough time there. As a matter of fact, my assistant coach was Jacques Plante, of all people.
Wow, did not know that.
He was living in the mountains of Montana Crans, which is a ski resort in Switzerland. And the management came to me and they said, "Norm, we have Jacques Plante living up in the mountains there, And they said, "Would you like an assistant coach?" I said, "Well, I guess so." A Hall of Famer, goaltender. I says, "How can I go wrong?" I says, "Yeah, let's have him." So he was my assistant for in Shero, Switzerland. It didn't go too well, because we had about 6 injuries that I lost my 6 top players in the first 2 months of the season. And ironically, we won our first 4 games, and I could see like a championship team. And all of a sudden, I lost 6 players, and I couldn't replace them. So it didn't go too well. So after the season, they didn't renew my contract, so I was going back to Winnipeg with my family. So I did do that, and all of a sudden, just before I left, they said, "Norm, we want to sign you to a new contract." I says, "Okay, let's do it." So I signed a contract with the Shero again for another year, and they told me, "Go back to Winnipeg or go back to Canada and bring back a decent player with you, because we could use 2 foreigners." So I said, "Okay." So I came back to Winnipeg, and after a couple of months in Winnipeg, I opened the Winnipeg Free Press, and it says, "Jacques Lemaire signs with Shero Cedars." And I said, "That's my job."
Oh.
So they never told me. And, they had signed Jacques Lemaire. And I had a contract, there was no problem as far as the contract. So I just called them. I said, "Okay, send me my money and we'll call it a day." And Jacques Lemaire replaced me.
Well, if you're going to get replaced, not a bad guy to get replaced by. That was strange.
Hall of Famer guy, won 5 Stanley Cups. They picked a good player.
Yeah, and he was still pretty much in his prime at that time too, as a player. That was the interesting thing. Is he exited, as did Ken Dryden that year, still with a lot of hockey left after their 4th cup in a row. And
definitely.
But I didn't realize that you were a part of that story as well. Now, you mentioned Jacques Plante. I often get the impression he was somewhat eccentric. What was your experience with Jacques?
Well, at the beginning, because I was at training camp with Jacques Plante back in 62, 63 when I turned pro with Montreal Canadiens. He was there, so I had known him before that, and but getting to know him in Switzerland was a different era, a different time, and but he was great. We got along real well.
Your story is like so many others, where you were very productive throughout your career. Look at your career in Pittsburgh, in Memphis, Kansas City, and with expansion, you finally get your opportunity, and you become a part of the very first St. Louis Blues team. What was that experience? Making the Blues and stepping on the NHL ice for the first time.
Oh man, was it? I'll never forget the opening game for St. Louis against Minnesota North Stars. It was a dream come true, of course, and I'll never forget it. And I remember, the place was packed, like 20,000 people we had there. And Anna Maria Alberghetti sang the opening song, "The Birth of the Blues," and it was chilling, I tell you, to be on the ice and listening to that song, and being part of the first St. Louis Blues game in St. Louis. It was great, and of course, Scotty Bowman was coaching at that time, and it was a thrill. I tell you, I'll never forget that.
Do you remember your first NHL goal?
Yes, I do. I scored it in the Forum. I think I scored it against Gump Worsley. It was October 11th, 1967. And yes, it was a nice shot. It wasn't a fluky goal. I came down the left wing and shot the far corner and picked the far corner in a low shot. Yeah, I'll never forget that goal for sure. And being at the Forum made it that more enjoyable.
Oh, absolutely. With the Blues had an interesting team that year. First of all, you've got the coach who ends up being the leading, most winningest coach in the history of hockey, Scotty Bowman. You also play with some real legends, not the least of which is goaltender Glenn Hall. What are your memories of Glenn Hall?
Well, Glenn Hall, I mean, he is spectacular. I mean, the guy would just about do a somersault and make a save. I mean, yeah, we know I was there for the Stanley Cup Finals against Montreal Canadiens, and Glenn Hall just was spectacular. He made some saves you would never believe, and what a acrobatic goaltender he was. I mean, yeah, and before the games, you know, he was always nervous. He was vomiting, as a matter of fact. But then he'd come out and just, you know, he kept the Blues in the game every game. And I think we had 2 overtime games in that series, and because of Glenn Hall, like it was it's so enjoyable to watch him play. And of course, he's from Saskatchewan, you know, like I am. So. It had to be good.
Absolutely. So we have when you made some stops along the way, and I was just curious if your basic general thoughts about you played in Pittsburgh before it was an NHL city. You played with the Hornets. What type of a hockey city was Pittsburgh back then?
Oh, very good. I know when I played in Pittsburgh. We had a real good team, like guys like Paul Henderson, Lowell McDonald, Tony, you know, Hank Bass, and I mean, there's a lot of players that played in Pittsburgh that went to the NHL, you know, that a year after or a couple of years later. But the fans were great. I really enjoyed Pittsburgh. I think. We used to draw about 10,000 a game, 8,000 a game. So they know their hockey, and as we very well know right now.
Right.
But at that time, there were real good fans, and I enjoyed Pittsburgh a lot because if you played well and you played hard, they really appreciated your talents and your play. So. You know, I enjoyed the game, and I'm not surprised at all that they're one of the best, you know, teams in the NHL as far as drawing crowds. I mean, of course, Mario Lemieux had a lot to do with that. So,
yes.
But no, Pittsburgh was good. I enjoyed it.
When you eventually end up in Cleveland, people forget that was a very strong American Hockey League market at that time. A strong, loyal fan base.
Yeah, Cleveland was great too. They had a good fan base, and I still think Cleveland should have the NHL hockey team because again, the year I played there, we drew well. We had like 8,000-9,000 people a game, and if you had a good team, a competitive team, they came to appreciate you and support you, and spending approximately 3 years in Cleveland, I enjoyed every minute of it, and I just wish that Cleveland would have a hockey team still. Especially, I think they could have played in the NHL. When the WHA came in, they built the white elephant between
right.
Akron and Cleveland, and that killed them. You know.
See, playing in the American League in those days wasn't such a bad thing. There's only 6 teams in the NHL. the markets that you were playing in were really good hockey markets. I'm sure you had a lot of close relationships built up with all that travel, all that time together, and all those great hockey cities.
Well, yeah, definitely, pretty well. Every town we went into, like playing in the year I played in Buffalo for Fred Shero. Again, we had a super hockey team, and we drew well in Buffalo, and like Hershey. Every time you went into Hershey, it was a great game. It was a competitive game, and it was a lot of fun going to Hershey. And when Baltimore had a team too, and I played against I think they were called the Baltimore Clippers, and the whole league was real good, was good hockey, and the fans appreciated the competitiveness of the league, and Buffalo was fantastic. We had a great team the year I was there when Fred Shero was coaching. I think we lost 15 games the whole year. And we had Brad Park there. We had Walter Chuk. We had Gilles Villemure. So we had a great hockey team. And right before the year I was there, we were going into the playoffs. And right before the playoffs, they called Tkachuk, they called Brad Park, and they called Villemure up. And, of course, we lost the first series against Hershey. But, American League was great. It was I enjoyed it. I wish it would have been in the NHL, but unfortunately it was. But the next best thing was the American Hockey League, which I think performed. We performed a lot of good hockey for the fans, and every fan, every city that had a team enjoyed our hockey, our style, and they appreciated our talents.
Yes, they did. You just brought up a good point. I only have a couple more questions for you. Playing for Freddie Shero back then, obviously he went on to be a Stanley Cup champion coach with the Philadelphia Flyers. Did you see that in him as a coach of the Buffalo Bisons?
No, I didn't. No, I not at the beginning till we started to play, and after I was there about a month and a half, we were a winning hockey team, and he was so easy to play for. He never said too much, but whatever he said, hit you between the eyes. But I enjoyed playing for Fred. We got along really well, and I played a lot when I was playing for him because of my style, and because I had a good season there in Buffalo when he was there. So it was fun playing for him, and just watching him coach a different style. The guy never went wacky or anything. If we were playing bad, he just came in the dressing room and he'd write a couple things and he'd say, "Okay, this is what we have to do," and we went out there and did it. But again, we were winning, so I don't know what would have happened if we'd have been last place team.
Right.
But Freddie was a good guy. I enjoyed playing for him, and we got along well.
Norm, you upon retirement, you become a successful businessman in Florida. You own a sporting goods store there, I believe.
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm. And enjoying life in Florida, and now you're back in Canada with your family. And I have talked extensively over the years with Greg about, and he's helped us out tremendously up here with floorball.
Yes, I know.
Which is a sport that I love and I think has great potential. Talk to us a little bit about floorball, how you find it, and what you think the potential of it can be.
Well, I think playing ice hockey, if you want to get really good with stick handling and improve your skills, floorball is the way to go. And, with Greg promoting it in British Columbia, and now he's all over the world, 2 years ago, Wayne Gretzky said to Greg, maybe you can come and help us out. So Greg Floorball and Pavel Barber, they went to help Gretzky, and they did the off-ice training with floorball. And if you're going to improve your skills, improve your game, I think floorball is the way to go. And I think every European hockey player that comes here has played floorball. And if you watch the European hockey players with the skills they've got, the reason is floorball. And I would recommend every young boy, 5 or 6, 7, 8 years old, to train off ice training. Do it with floorball, because it's going to improve your skills as far as the ice hockey. And I'm trying to help Greg here, with the floorball, and hopefully we can have it played in the Olympics one day. And I think that's what they're striving for right now.
Well, it's a great game. I appreciate you you're giving your thoughts on that. One of the beautiful things about floorball is that it doesn't require any special equipment. So we've been able to, with some NHL pros, with the Bruins alumni, go to various inner city areas and bring floorball to the kids, and they can go out there and play without helmets and shin pads and risk of injury. As you said, girls, boys, kids of any age can play. And it's quite a sport with a lot of potential. A lot of people in Europe, you look at the crowds in some of those games in Finland and Sweden, very very popular.
Yeah, it's great. And the parents love that because of the minimal cost.
Well, Norman, in addition to your work with floorball, I hear that you're also writing a book about your career.
I was coaching in Arizona, and I developed an adult training camp there, and it turned out to be successful. But this couple came to me and he says, "Norm, I think you should write a book." So I wrote a book, and it's not published yet, but I hope I can publish it in next 6 months or so, maybe a year. And it's called The Original.
Perfect.
So hopefully it comes out in about a year.
Well, Norm, we covered a lot today, but I know there's a lot more to your story, and your book will certainly cover that. So when it's ready, let us know, and we'll be happy to promote it to our thousands of fans around the world.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, thanks, Mark, and it's been a pleasure and fun talking to you. And let's get the floorball going.
Absolutely. You're a good man. We appreciate your insights and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks, Norm.
Okay, Mark. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast. Be sure to visit us at prohockeyalumni.org.